People say there is a first time for everything. A first kiss, your first car, the unrequited first love. However, what does this mean in the grand scope of things? Are firsts more monumental because they are the first, or do we get better with practice? Do we remember our firsts as more important than they actually were, holding on to that magical moment as a mark of our past and future selves? Do our firsts outshine what comes next? On A First Time for Everything, we will explore with our guests their firsts and how those impacted the seconds, thirds, and even countless times after. Is the first the best or merely the beginning? Or worse, was the first the last because it was so bad? We will dig into the recesses of our memories and consider whether or not a first was the start of something amazing or something we'd rather not remember. Come along with me, Juliet Rose, as I put our guests in the hot seat to analyze their first and how they defined who they became. I promise you're in for a fun, although maybe bumpy ride. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of First Time for Everything. That was kind of a cool new little intro. Had a glitch there for a second, but we got it fixed. So welcome again to the show. Tonight, we are welcoming our guest, Russ, and I'm going to say this, Colchamiro? Colchamiro. Okay, very good. I just want to remind everyone to, give us a like and send us a star to let us know how we're doing here at Go Indie Now. Every time you contribute, you get entered into our season prize package drawing with gift cards, swag, and more. And hello, Anita. Always nice to see you. So again, we're talking with Russ. Russ, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and where they can find you?
Sure. Just real quick in the intro, I saw you had Bobby Nash on there. We contribute to some of the same projects, actually.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I love Bobby.
So I'm Russ Colchamiro. I write in three kind of genres. I do science, sci-fi, and fantasy. I do mystery, crime, and thrillers. And I do horror, and I kind of do mashups. In particular, I write sci-fi thrillers, predominantly some space opera, and then I do some mystery and horror and crime. And you can find me on social channels. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram and Blue Sky. I don't do the anymore for reasons that should be obvious. And you can find me on my website. And also, in addition to being an author, I have my own show, Russ's Rock and Roller Coaster, which you can find on YouTube. Is about 140 episodes or so, and they're all free. Just go into YouTube, type my name in there, and you'll find them.
Very cool. You have to check those out. That's kind of neat that you do that. Well, it's interesting too, because you mentioned that you do like these different genres, and I do as well. I mean, I don't do fantasy, but I do sci-fi, mystery, thriller, and horror. So we're going to cross over there.
There you go. See, you're my girl.
Yeah. So that's really neat. So I actually want to kind of jump in on that one because, there's been a lot of kind of talk about whether or not being a multi-genre author is beneficial or harmful if you use the same name, basically. So what is your experience with that?
Well, so when I started out, I've been writing on and off my whole life, but my first novel came out in 2010. It was called Finders Keepers, and it was a kind of a sci-fi backpacking comedy. Kind of think of like a combination of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy meets Bill and Ted. And there were 3 books in the series. It was Finders Keepers was the first one, Genius to Milo as the second book, and then Astropalooza as the third one. And my intent at that time, I really saw this as being kind of like my Discworld. And I thought, wow, this is it. I'm going to be writing these books for decades. And I had massive plans. The first book came out, if you remember, there's the financial crisis hit in 2008. And I was negotiating with a couple of publishers, and I had 3 different publishers, and 2 of them were fairly prominent, who said to me, if this was any other time in the world, you got a deal right now, but you're kind of right on the bubble and the world's getting a little wonky and we don't know. And then the whole system collapsed. And at the same time, that was the very beginning of the shift from print to ebooks. So I kind of started to punch through at the absolute wrong time. There were a lot of factors that were against me, as a solo author, unknown at that time. I was able to get a national distribution contract by myself, and I was in 25 or so Barnes and Nobles brick and mortar stores throughout the country. And you think, woohoo, except that the book didn't sell. They physically were on the shelf, but nobody bought them, and they didn't do any promotion within the stores. And then the market collapsed, and then, that was it for me. Now, in between, I wrote, you see on the screen, Crossline, which is space opera. And what I decided was I wanted to do one, Finders Keepers book, then one something else, and then the second one, and then one. I wanted to alternate. But I wound up writing, when Crossline came out, I was very excited. And then I got double whammy. There were 2 shows. Now I'm in New Jersey, but at the time I was living in Queens. I'm sure you probably couldn't tell that I have any kind of an accent, but that's okay.
I'm a Long Island girl, so yeah.
Where?
Port Chaff.
Okay, I grew up in Merrick.
Okay.
I was South Shore. Yep.
Okay.
I know a lot of people from Port Jefferson. Yep.
Yeah.
So there was a show, Icon, out in Stony Brook, and then they had moved venues. They were moving out to Hofstra. Sandy came in, destroyed the campus. The show got canceled. So my big book launch did not happen. And then there was another show. I can't remember what it was. And something else happened where the show died and my book launch just tanked. And it really broke my heart because I really had very big plans for this book. And I'm still planning to write more in the series. And it was really a gut punch because I was very excited about it. And I then said, I joined this group called Crazy 8 Press. Now, a lot of you probably may not know of it. There are actually 11 of us. There's a bunch of fairly prominent authors. So Peter David, who wrote comic books as well, right? He wrote The Hulk, and he wrote a lot of Star Trek books. And Michael Jan Friedman, New York Times best-selling Star Trek author, Bob Greenberger, Alan Rosenberg. And we were like, wow, this is really going to be a thing. And they invited me to join them. I'm like, holy cow, this is really exciting. And then at that time, I felt like I didn't know a lot of people in the book world. My community was very small because when I started out, I was very nervous. I didn't know anybody, and I was very guarded. And I was like, I don't need you. I'm going to do this on my own, which is the absolute worst attitude you could possibly have as an author. You need a, they say it takes a village. Well, you need a village and a village and a village and another village just to get anywhere.
Say it louder for the people in the back.
Yeah, right. You cannot make this. I mean, I'm not saying you can't, but it's really hard to make it with tons of support. Try making it with no support. It's very tough. So we were doing a lot of anthologies, and I thought at the time, as I was starting to come up, a bunch of people that I knew were inviting me to say, hey, Russ, we're doing this collection of stories. Why don't you give us one? And I said no for about 3 or 4 years, not because I wasn't appreciative. It's just that I didn't feel like I could write a short story. I hadn't cracked the code in my head because I need a little, I'm an author and my words mean things. I need space, right? Because I tend to write fairly elaborate storylines. That's kind of one of my things, and I'm proud of it that I can write these sort of tapestry of elements and where they start off like, there's no way this is going to come together. There's no way this is going to fit. Oh my God, he did it. How did he do that? But how do you do that in 5,000 words? It's like really hard. And I couldn't wrap my brain around it. But then I had that aha moment where I said, you know what? Don't be a dumbass. A story no matter how short or how long, it has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. And I kind of went, oh yeah, it does kind of have a beginning. So you just write less. Well, anyway, so then I started contributing a lot of short stories to various collections, both through Crazy 8 Press and through some other publishers, because I wanted to expand my reach. But what I wasn't doing at that time was pumping out enough novels. And that's what I really wanted to do. So I kind of went through this. It was worth it in the sense that I stretched myself. I built some muscles that I didn't have, and I learned how to write short form. But I felt like I was not building the momentum that I wanted. And I started to dabble in some other genres a little bit, but I was predominantly a sci-fi guy, even though I love my whole life. I love mystery. I love crime. I love thrillers. I love noir. I love detectives. I love it. I love it. I love it. And then I had kind of an aha moment. So I mentioned my first series before, Finders Keepers, and in the second book, Ingenious to Milo, There was a blink and you miss it. I just came up with this character called Angela Hardwick, and she's a private eye. In this again, this was a sci-fi backpacking kind of goofy world, and I don't really know where she came from. I didn't really create her so much as she just decided to show up, and she was unimportant to the plot at that time. And look, she was one tiny piece of one chapter, and that was it. Like, had she not been in the novel, it wouldn't have affected the plot at all. But as soon as she showed up, I kind of went, that's interesting. And maybe I conjured her up because I just love private eyes, and I always wanted to write something like that. And I said, wow, I think there's something there. So I elevated her to a very important secondary character in the third book in Astropalooza. And she got a chance to be this, even though it was this, goofier kind of tapestry. She was a hard-boiled private eye in this sort of goofy intergalactic world. And I really got into it. And I thought, this is what I want to do. But I wasn't sure if I could do it. So I created this through Crazy 8 Press. What we do is we do at least one anthology every year. And we kind of rotate whose turn at bat it was. And it was mine. And I did it. I was the publisher and the editor of a book called Love, Murder, and Mayhem, which going back, I would rename it. They're all sci-fi tropes: superheroes, supervillains, AI, spaceships, time travel, that kind of thing. And really, I did it because I wanted a vehicle for Hardwick. I wanted to see if I could give this sci-fi private eye a chance to do her thing, just to see if I could do it. So I wrote, it was, I don't know, 7,000 words or whatever it was, as a standalone world, that mystery that took place in this world that I had already created, but it was going to be where the first series was more, a bit more comedic and a bit more fantastical. I wanted her to be a little bit more noir and driven, and kind of an offshoot. And I was very happy with the way it came out. And I said, okay, this character is really speaking to me. And then I decided to write this series, which you can see on my poster right behind me. There's 5 novels in the series, all featuring Angela Hardwick. And, I went back and forth and debating, like, well, are the crime writers, the crime readers, I should say, are they going to accept this sci-fi character? And the way I position, in my mind, Hardwick is part Blade Runner, part Doctor Who, part John Wick, part John Wick. That's the way I see, and that's the way she really is. And I thought, this is going to be and at the time I was checking a lot of boxes, and I wasn't doing it to check them, but they did. You've got a really powerful female protagonist. She's hard-boiled, she's tough as nails, but she's also got a little bit of a sense of humor, and she's loyal, and she does the street level investigation, but she also kicks ass. But underneath there's a little bit, I'm not going to say a heart of gold exactly, but she's not all just grit. And it was challenging because I had to decide how to sell these books, because you can write them, that's great, but you want people to read them.
Yeah.
And what I discovered is that the traditional crime, mystery, thriller readers, they have no interest. I tried and I tried and I tried. And I spoke to a bunch of authors who also try to do kind of like the sci-fi and mystery blend. And they all told me the same thing. It's like banging your head up against the wall. Those readers are they're rigid. They those readers. So I said, all right, let me really lean into the sci-fi crowd. And it's been a bit of the readers people who read Hardwick overwhelmingly seem to love the series. Now, which isn't to say that people haven't gotten bad reviews, of course, because you're going to get
everybody does. Yeah.
You're going to get bad ones, but it's really been the people who do read them really connect with the series. There's 5 books, and I plan to write more.
And do you feel like the sci-fi crowd's more accepting than the kind of like detective crowd?
So the traditional mystery, crime, thriller readers, for the most part, they just won't, even though I think they would really like them, because those readers are like, oh, they have aliens and things, but mine really don't.
Right.
For the most part, they don't. It's just, sci-fi, really is about setting.
It
right?
is.
Everything else is the same. People talk, you have interactions, you have, a protagonist and antagonist, you have mystery, you have action, suspense. It's all the same stuff, but they just won't have it.
Yeah. I think some people hear sci-fi, they just think, like you said, kind of like that, space and aliens, shut it down. They don't realize like sci-fi really encompasses so much more than that.
Correct. But what I've done is in the last, let's say 4 or 5 years, and which is no one's more surprised than me, is that making headway in the horror space. Because horror readers read everything.
Yes.
Everything.
I write horror too. So yes, totally.
And I do now a lot of horror conventions.
Nice.
And those are my people.
Yes.
I can really be myself, and they seem to respond to me. And I'm still trying to navigate, how to position myself. So while I like writing in various genres, there's advantages to doing it because you don't pigeonhole yourself. But there's that, always that risk of being, a master of none. And no one knows, like, well, what are you? So you write this and this and this, and I don't know how to think about you. So I really dove very hard into Hardwick, and I'm going to write more. Although I'm writing some horror, really more horror stuff as well, separate from Hardwick, even though the Hardwick series has more touches of horror as we go along. I've just realized within myself is that in general, while I can write in multiple genres, darker is kind of where I lean, with balanced out with humor. And I do that. And I'm not saying, it's that I write comedies, because for the most part, I don't. But I do use humor to balance out the tension. So I have found through trial and error and just kind of being out there. And of course it was tough because the Hardwick series came out during the pandemic when it was impossible to be in front of people. And at that time in particular, readers were hunkered down. If I don't already know the series, I'm not interested. I ain't touching anything new because I'm so terrified about what's happening. I want comfort food, and comfort is things that I know. So anything new, it's like la la la. I don't hear it. So now that we're back out there again, I feel like I'm almost starting from scratch, because I have to make up for 3 years where we were locked, 3-4 years where not only people were locked down and scared, but people lost their jobs. They're having financial issues and all the emotional and psychological trauma that we've gone through. And I blame no one for wanting what they want. I'm like that too. I like certain things I'm interested in and other things that I'm not. But finding the horror community has really been big for me. I'm actually doing StokerCon in Stamford, Connecticut next month, which is my first one ever because I'm here in New Jersey, so it's fairly easy. Although I'm staying there for a couple of days. That kind of darker genre is kind of where I think I really kind of like to live, and those fans seem to relate to me pretty well so far. So good. So it's been, writing in multiple genres, I think, has its advantages, but it also has its disadvantages strictly from a marketing standpoint. And that's, of course, as if you're an author, that writing the book, sadly, is the easiest part of your madness, right? I mean,
I say it all the time. Yeah.
all the torture that we put ourselves through, and the plotting, the revisions, and the imposter syndrome, and all the stuff you go with, and all that sweat and tears, and it's done, and you're like, whoo, and you're like, all right, now it gets difficult. And you're like, oh God.
Yeah.
So it's its own thing, but that's why you do your show and I do my show, right? We get out there and we got to talk about stuff.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, I think that writing, for most people, is the easy part. Marketing, at least for me, is it's pulling teeth. But I do really well in person, not so much on social media. I'm working on it, and
that's how I am too. Yeah. I mean, I find that if you get enough people in front of me, I mean, I can sell. For that crowd, I'm a kind of a natural salesman. I'm not. You could probably tell I'm not particularly shy when it comes to this kind of thing, and I can rope them in. It goes real well, but I find that it's very difficult for me to translate my personality online. Unless we're doing this, I can do it. But like through a Facebook post or some little scribble on Blue Sky, it's not the same. And what I find fascinating is that there are certain people who are so good at it. They are so absolutely brilliant at positioning themselves through social media. I won't say that I'm one of those people. I mean, I don't think I'm awful, but I don't think I shine in that forum in the way that I do talking to people, like either virtually this way or in front of people. That's kind of where I'm at my best. But unfortunately, as you know, you can only do so many conventions and you can only be in front of so many people. So it's, even if you're great, how many books can you really sell, let's say, in a 3-day weekend? I mean, if you have a great show, you sell 50, and that's really good. And which I've done. Yeah. But man, you got to hustle to do it. And even if you do that, you're like, okay, I sell 50. I'm not trying to sell 50. I'm trying to sell, I want to sell 50.
Hundreds, thousands, yeah.
So it's, you really have to, if you're going to do this, I find that you really have to love it, and you have to really want to connect with readers, because the odds of you breaking through, I'm not saying it can't be done, because it can be done, but the odds are just not stacked in any one person's favor, because the market is so saturated and it's very difficult to break through the noise and distinguish yourself. Yeah. So, and look, and maybe you will break through, and God willing, we all will. I really hope so. And I felt a few times I was right there. And what killed me? I finally, for me, I had cracked the code on Twitter. I was doing really well. And then we all know what happened.
Right. Yeah. I same.
So that was just like years and years and a decade worth of investment of time, money, effort. And I finally figured it out, got wiped out in 6 months. I was just wiped off the map. So that was a decade of investment of all those things gone. And I had to start over from scratch. And the thing is, nothing can really replace what that was, at least not right now.
Not right now, yeah. And I know that people do like Blue Sky, and they're doing, and I have a Blue Sky too. I haven't felt the I guess momentum there at all. Yeah,
that energy is not, it's not the same. And that's today. Who knows? Tomorrow's another day. So we keep on keeping on. So anyway, I think that's probably. That's a normal way for me to answer, was you ask a simple question and I take it.
That works, because that's how I do this too. Like I told people the show started, there is really I have no plan. I'm going to go into this going we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
And it usually works. So, especially if my guest is talkative, which you are, which is great. And then the original question for anybody who's listening that maybe lost track 23 minutes ago was that I was just asking about whether or not it was, Russ felt it was helpful or harmful to be a multi-genre author that doesn't change their name per genre. So.
It's both. It has some advantages, it does, but it also has disadvantages.
Yeah. And I agree. And that's, because I'm the same boat. Like the advantages that I felt was when I am in front of somebody, I'll always sell a book because I have different genres. I can usually meet their genre and I can engage with them.
That's exactly
Disadvantages is that you're not known as a specific thing. Correct. You're not like horror, such and such horror author. Right. Even though I write horror and I write sci-fi, all of my fiction is dark, has a dark element to it. But it's still different genres. And so online, that's a little bit more of a challenge because yes, there are great groups, but they tend to be very specific to specific genres. Yes. So it's hard because you're like, oh, and I also write, and people are like, huh, okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of fragmentation there.
And then Joe says, the indie authors con, Elon. No kidding. Oh my gosh. No kidding. Thanks, Elon.
Exactly.
It's like the new thanks Obama. It's thanks, Elon. Mm-hmm. Social media definitely comes with its own challenges, but there are really great and supportive groups out there. And that's what I was saying. It's really important to kind of understand that don't go this on your own. You'll burn yourself out.
It's tough. It's tough.
Even if you're just joking around with people, it's good to have that kind of support. People go, oh, totally been there. I get it.
Absolutely.
You have that show where you sell a book and someone's like, totally been there. Don't let it stress you. So let's go back. I'm going to ask you first. So obviously you have quite a bit of books out now. Yep. You talked about your first book, and let's go back to when did you really know that you wanted to be a writer? Was this something in childhood, or did you kind of figure this out later in life?
I wanted to do it since I was a kid. I dabbled with it on and off, when I was little. I mean, terrible stuff. And then I wrote some short stories when I was in high school. And interesting, so I've told the story before. When I was about, let's say, 16, I had a very intense, it was my first real teenage crush on this girl. She was Irish, red hair and everything. And she was really involved in, her family was from Ireland, and she had a lot of connections over there. And at the time, she had there was a program where they did kind of like a swap, where like you would take someone from Ireland, come stay at your house for a month or 6 weeks or 2. And there was this girl, I can't remember her name. Let's say she was 10 or 12 or whatever it was. And God, was she pissed off at the Brits, because this was at the height of the Troubles in Ireland. Right. Okay. Now, this is for context. This was in the mid 80s. And what did I know about the Troubles? Nothing. But I was really influenced by the intensity of what was going on. So I wound up writing this trilogy of short stories that was kind of loosely based on the two of them and me. And, I kind of did this thing where like this American writer gets involved with this girl from America, but winds up going over to Ireland because he thinks he can make a difference, because he gets involved in it, and it turns into a kind of a whole thing. Well, here's an interesting thing for me. In the story, in the third one, and honestly, they're gone. I lost them physically. I had them on paper. They literally disappeared. Yeah. I'm kicking myself to this day that I didn't make copies. But in the story, this girl, the character based on the girl, was flying from Ireland to the U.S. And what had happened is, the way I'd written it was that the journalist American based on me had gotten involved and uncovered some really nasty secrets about what the British government and the army was doing to the Irish, and that they'd stolen it, and they were going to come to the US and give it to the US media to expose what was really going on there. And the character based on this girl was on the same plane as the character who was coming back with this information. And in the story, over the Atlantic Ocean, the plane explodes because to get rid of the evidence, and they wind up killing this girl. What happened literally 2 days later, literally, a little thing called Lockerbie, plane from the UK flying to the US explodes over the Atlantic Ocean, and the girl who I had based the character on was supposed to be on that plane.
Wow.
Just by something happened where she couldn't make it. She was supposed to be on that actual plane. I mean, the hairs just stood up on the back of my neck. I was like, and I told, to my friend who, this girl read it, she was like, what? She's like, don't write anything else down. It was like really freaky stuff. Like, I wrote the thing, and then it, like, literally 2 days later, it happened. I was like, what the fudge is this? Well, anyway, I always wanted to do something bigger with it. So I funneled it into, up on the screen. So Crossline is a very different book altogether. This is not, it's not about the Troubles. It's space opera, and in the novel Crossline, so it posits that a modern day space pilot is testing out warp thrusters, and if they work, it's going to revolutionize space travel as we know it. And for reasons I will not explain, he's forced into a wormhole, and he ends up in a parallel Earth where he may have been destined for all along. But on that parallel Earth, there's only two factions left. One that's sort of loosely based on New York, and one that's sort of loosely based on the Grand Canyon. And one lives a very, urban life, the cities and the skyscrapers. And the other ones are like, they have their own sophistication, but they live in, basically it's a cave life, but they're not cavemen, but that's the way they choose to live. But they're both battling over one piece of tech. And what we learn is that the pilot, all he wants to do is go back home, but he gets sucked deeper and deeper into this battle. And over the course of the novel, what happens is that while he's trying to get back home, on our Earth in the early 1950s, a dead broke, uneducated cast attendant from Nowheresville, Texas, tumbleweeds and all, he stumbles into an oil well, and he becomes the richest man in the world. And he uses that wealth to finance a private space program that launches that first pilot. And over the course of the novel, you learn how their two lives intersect. I used the elements from that first trilogy that I wrote when I was 16, ended up in that novel.
That's cool.
I literally held on to it for the ideas of it for almost 30 years, just looking for a home for it. And it kind of found its way in there.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a trip. Now, the girl that you based that on, do you still know her? Or is she like long gone into history?
No.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. I'm sure I wish I don't remember her name. It was so long ago.
Yeah.
I'm 54, so it was almost 40 years ago. So I don't really remember.
Yeah. I'm 54 as well. So yeah, I was thinking about like I don't even remember. Like I'm lucky I remember my best friend's name from high school. So, I don't remember anybody else.
Yeah.
Well, it was funny because we were talking before the show started because I had gone to your website and saw that we both have a book called Trigger Point.
Yes.
Which is so funny. Now, mine is completely different than yours because I did read, just I was curious to see. Mine has to do with avalanches, and the trigger point of an avalanche is where it starts, whatever triggers that to start. But yours is part of your Angela Hardwick series, right?
Yes. Actually, so I want to just point something out. So in the Hardwick series, I want to frame it up a little differently. So Hardwick, she's a private eye who takes on the kind of cases that you think a private eye would take: missing persons, kidnapping, arson, extortion, murder, corporate espionage. But she also takes on cases that deal with time travel, parallel universes, androids, aliens, spaceships, and that kind of thing. There are 5 books in the series. You can read them in any order. It does not matter. Right? I reintroduce the world building and the characters every time out. And you do not, and this is important, you do not have to commit to the whole series. Think of them like a James Bond series, right? You can watch one James Bond movie. That's all. They give you everything you need to know. And if you don't like, if you're done, you're done. If you never see another James Bond movie, you're not missing anything. Well, it's the same thing with these books. They're standalone thrillers. Now, there is some character development throughout. So if you're a purist, you might want to read, start at the beginning and go to the end, but you don't have to. It really doesn't matter. And even though there's some connective tissues book to book, I weave in a minor recaps within the next book because it refers to things that happened before, because there's a continuation of there's a large 5-story arc, but that's only if you're a real purist. You can read them one at a time. So Trigger Point is book 5. And that was an interesting one for me because, well, actually, if you don't mind, let me step back for a second.
Sure.
My goal with the series was not to repeat myself. There are certain series where, especially when there's a detective involved or a cop or whoever your lead is that more or less every book is the same. They have kind of a cut and paste formula.
Sure. And
they change the details. And guess what? If they sell, God bless you. We should all be so unlucky as to have a best-selling series, but it's just not my way. I don't like to repeat myself. So I like every book. I want to make sure it feels organic to Hardwick's world, but everyone is different. So in the first book, Crackle and Fire, Hardwick is approached by a young accounting executive. Actually, I should probably step back and just give you the world that she's in. So she is from a realm called Eternity. Now, within that, just like Hollywood is all based on movies and TV shows and production, and all the other businesses in that town support it, right? There's advertising, there's marketing, restaurants, car dealerships, everything funnels into the Hollywood machine. Well, in Eternity, this is a realm that physically designs, repairs, and constructs the universe. Somebody has to build the planet. Someone has to build the asteroid field. Someone has to design them. Someone has to fix them when they break. That's the world that she lives in. Okay. So just for context. So she's hired by an accounting executive who says, this middle-aged intern has absconded with some very important files. I need you to get them back. She doesn't really want to take the case for reasons I won't explain, but she ultimately does. And she winds up getting mixed up in this kind of Occupy Wall Street type of a social movement, these dueling gangsters, and a madman from Earth who has galactic ambitions. And if he is set loose on the universe, God, it's going to be bad news for a whole lot of people. So that's kind of book one. Now, book two, which is Fractured Lives, Hardwick is approached by a middle-aged mother who says that her daughter, and she says, please, 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 I'm begging you, don't dismiss me. Everyone thinks I'm a lunatic. I'm not. I have a daughter who is a freshman at this prestigious art school, art and celestial design school. She's like a savant. Everyone says has had a nervous breakdown. That is not what's happened. Someone has stolen a piece of her soul, and I need you to get it back. And Hardwick's kind of like, okay. So she winds up getting mixed up in university politics, the art world, and there's a very heavy cyberpunk component. And we learn about Hardwick's origin story, because someone important from her past shows up, and we kind of learn how Hardwick became Hardwick. And there's the kind of this protagonist called the antagonist, the Scarlet Raj. Ooh, it's kind of like an urban myth. You better do your homework or the Scarlet Raj will come and get you. Maybe it's real, maybe it's not. And anyway, that kind of all gets pulled together. In the third book, Hot Ash, it's a very different kind of book. So she, this widow comes to her and says, my elderly husband. So just so you know, I have a day job. I work in the real estate business. I do public relations for big real estate companies. For example, I worked on One World Trade Center, what you know is the Freedom Tower. So I was on that media team. I was in that building for 6 or 7 years while they were building it. I was on the 90th floor when it had no walls. So I've been involved in some pretty serious real estate. Well, anyway, her husband had an affordable housing empire, but he got very sick. And she said when he was on his deathbed, my stepkids messed with him because his mind was gone. He changed the will and he cut me out of it. I need you to get my real estate back. So she winds up investigating it, and she kind of goes down this rabbit hole where she stumbles upon this synthetic form of cocaine, this new form, highly addictive form of non-addictive form of cocaine, the synthetic concrete. And she stumbles upon this beautiful domed city, which is beautiful, but it's covering up a very insidious conspiracy. And she uncovers that, and there's a little bit of space opera mixed in, and it's very high stakes. So then in the fourth book, once again, I wanted to shift gears and do something totally different, which is called Blunt Force Rising. I broke the mold, and it's a locked room thriller where Hardwick and her protege, Eric Whistler, are providing private security on a galactic cruise ship. Think of just like a cruise ship on the ocean, except put it in space, right? Same kind of thing. They're hosting an AI and robotics conference, and they're doing private security. And this is at a time when androids have recently been granted rights. But just because they have rights on paper doesn't mean that everyone's okay with it. And to my mind, in this book, androids are a surrogate for any marginalized people who are discriminated against, really kind of for reasons that are perplexing. Well, anyway, on the ship, a murder takes place. It sets off a chain reaction where you've got humans and androids are basically, because something else happens, where they're basically in a zombie apocalypse, trapped on a ship where communications have been knocked out. They're literally 1 million miles from anywhere. You can't escape. You can't call for help. And it's a bloody, brutal fight to the finish. And either you're going to make it to the end or you're not. And then that brought us to Trigger Point. And once again, I flipped the script. And for reasons I will not explain, Hardwick is recently been released from prison. And her first case back, she's got to I got to eat. I've been out of action for a while. She gets hired by this very nasty pimp whose best earner has just been murdered. And for him, it's more personal than he cares about the loss in business. Hardwick doesn't want to take this case, but feels like she has to. And again, for reasons I won't explain why. And she winds up getting partnered up with this very sketchy detective. And while she's trying to investigate this crime, her partner, Whistler, has vanished. He's caught in some sort of a temporal loop where he keeps phasing in and out of matter, and he can only like talk in for a few seconds, and his messages are very fragmented, and she's only getting bits and pieces. Meanwhile, the infrastructure of space-time is literally starting to crumble. It's disintegrating. And all these things are happening at once, and they all end up converging together because she's got to find the trigger point for all this madness. And there is a lot. Again, this is heavy cyberpunk. Actually, books 2, 4, and 5 are heavy cyberpunk. There's a lot of, and we deal with the dreamscape, and we deal with nightmares and symbolism, and kind of the demons that really lurk kind of like deep within you. So it's a very personal book for Hardwick. And of course, I have my usual, multi-layered plotting that kind of pulls all the things together. And this one is like for all the marbles. And the way I look at it is the first 5 books wrap up what I consider to be kind of like series 1. And then my plan is to write I have another 5 books that are mapped out in my head that are they're going to completely flip the script again. But I'm writing some other things in between. So yes, my trigger point is there's no avalanche, but there's a lot of darkness and a lot of like the dreamscape. It was actually partly influenced by, remember the movie Altered States?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Altered States and Dreamscape were very heavy influences in this book. So again, it's got street level investigation. It's also got some madness, some psychological horror, and it's got the action, and it's got the Hardwick mixing it up, and there's their usual action John Wicky kind of stuff in there. So
that's really cool. Yeah. I actually like too that because we both use that title for completely different stories,
yes.
But there are slight elements that actually aren't the same.
I'm sure.
Psychological, whatever triggers kind of the unfolding of an event. So that's really cool.
The last thing I just want to mention about the series, because it's significant for me. So, and thematically in the first 2 books in particular, so Hardwick has a young son. So when we first meet her, she's in her early 30s, but she's got a young son. And the thing is the question becomes, for the first 2 books, can I be this hard-boiled private eye who's taking on sometimes these intergalactic cases? This is not a 9-to-5 job, right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I might be gone for days, weeks, months, years. I don't know. Lost in time and space. Can I do this job and be a good mother to my son? If the answer is, who's only 5 at the time, if the answer is yes, well, what does her life look like? If the answer is no, what does her life look like? She's got some very difficult choices to make. And then broader, she has this Hardwick has his protege, Eric Whistler, who's about 10 years her junior. When he first shows up, he's, put me in, coach. I'll do anything. I'll dumpster dive for evidence. I'll stay up for 4 days straight. I don't care. I'll do anything. And he does. And he learns, and he's loyal, and he makes mistakes. And Hardwick never said that she was good at training people, but she kind of figures she probably needs some help. But as this series goes on, he finally gets to a point where he says, you know what? I'm not your intern anymore. I want a seat at the table. And she says, basically, oh, well, how nice for you. So they really butt heads in the next couple of books. And there's a lot of friction between the 2 of them because, it's basically like, I'm not ready for my baby to grow up. I'm not ready to give you all this responsibility, but he's kind of not a kid anymore. So how does that work? And all those pieces with her son, with Whistler, everything comes to a head in the fifth book. And she's got a bunch of recurring characters that pop in and out of the whole series. So it's also, so you get some familiar faces along the way. But again, if you only read 1 book in the series, it's okay. I tell you who everybody is, and you can be one and done. So don't feel any pressure to commit to all 5 books. You can, but you certainly don't have to.
Yeah, that's good. And I do find that with series, like when I'm at an event and I'm talking to people about series, it is really beneficial if your series can also be standalones. Because a lot of people are like, well, I don't know if I have time for a series, or I don't want to read this one if I haven't read the first one. And, so if it's a standalone, it is a good marketing tool.
It took me a long time. Honestly, it took me years of selling the series to figure out. I thought I was doing that by saying you can read them in any order. But the implication subtly is that you still got to read them all.
Right.
And I realized, I got to stop doing that. So only in the last 6 or 9 months, I've started being very clear. You can be one and done. You do not have to commit to the whole series. I start over every time. This is who your characters are. This is your setting. This is who you are. And anything important you need to know, I will tell you.
For sure. Yeah. It's a very smart marketing tool.
And just one last thing, and I'll stop. In the first book only, Crackle and Fire, there's a bonus short story at the end.
Okay.
It's one of the best short stories I've ever written. So just don't miss out on that. Only in Crackle and Fire. That's where there's a little bit less of the Blade Runner world building in the first book, because I hadn't quite cracked that yet, but it's definitely there in that short story, and it's in every novel after that. But don't miss that short one, because I'm very proud of that one.
And is it interlinked in that story series?
Crackle and so the novel is by itself, and the short story is just a bonus. It's in her world, but they're kind of like you could read the short story alone, and it would be fine.
Cool. Yeah. Always got to have those bonuses in there. So let's go back a little bit and let's talk about reviews, because that is something you mentioned earlier. And I think a lot of writers think if they don't get all 5 stars, they're not successful. So talk a little bit about reviews that you've gotten, your negative reviews, and how that really impacted you as an author.
When I first started, I was a little more sensitive to bad reviews. But the thing is that people can say whatever they want. They're allowed to. And it doesn't mean that their reviews make any sense. This book sucks.
Right.
Okay. Well, all right. Thanks for playing. I mean, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. I got one review, which was epically, it was so incredible. It was so like this woman on one of my, not this series, on something else. She went on this long diatribe about how I triggered her and fucked her all up. And even though it was a novella within a collection, and it was the mildest of the stories, and she just like blew a gasket. And I just thought, wow, that's awesome. If you're gonna write something really terrible, that's the way to do it. Like really go all in. Look, I can't think of anyone that I know who says, woohoo, I got bad reviews, yay. I mean, it's not enjoyable unto itself for people to say, I don't like what you did. Now, if they say, listen, if the review is negative, but it says, I didn't like it for these particular reasons, and their reasons seem valid, you go, all right, fair point. But if you say, I don't like it because I didn't connect with it, it doesn't affect me really in any way, because it's not necessarily to me a reflection on whether the book was good or not. I mean, because it's subjective. Who's to say if you have one person who says this is the best book I've ever read, and another person who says this is the worst book I've ever read, is one right and one wrong? Are they both right? Are they both wrong? I mean, you have to decide how much weight you give them. So, it's as been said by others, if you're going to give weight and say the good reviews are meaningful, then you got to give weight to all of them.
Yes.
So you have to decide for yourself how you feel about it. I mean, do I still get a little bit, when the book comes out, I go, yeah, I don't care what people say. I don't care what people say, one of those type of things. Yeah, it's a little nerve-wracking at time, but I think my attitude is this. If I'm not proud of it, I'm not going to put my name on it.
Yeah.
And I do the best that I know how to do at the time. Every story that I write, whether it's a novel, a novella, a short story, it's the best I can do at the time under the circumstances. And that's all. Like, by definition, you can't do better than your best. I try to give it my all, and I do a lot of editing. I'm ruthless with myself with editing, and then I give it to some very trusted beta readers, and they are not shy, and I don't want them to be. And when I screw up, they hold me accountable, which is exactly what I want. I look at it as when I hand off a book to someone, I figure it's probably somewhere in the C- to C+ range, and I need them to help me get it up to a B+ or an A.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I shoot for. And then I hope for the best. Is every book I've written an A? No, I mean, it doesn't even make sense. I've probably been in 35 or 40 books at this point, combination of stuff. You could argue some are better than others, and that's fine. And then I just trust that the quality will shine through, and that if enough people will read them, longer term, the good reviews will outweigh the bad ones. And that's kind of my attitude in general.
Yeah, I think that's a good attitude to have. Now, here's something I do on every show, and I'll kind of go first. And that is, often we see new writers and they're struggling out in the world, and there's a bazillion things we want to say to them. Like my piece of advice, and obviously get an editor, things like that, are obvious. My best piece of advice is make sure you have a team that's willing to criticize you, makes you a better writer. If you were going to give a new writer one piece of advice, what would that piece of advice be?
Take a moment to decide for yourself how you define success.
That's a good one.
You might be at a stage of your career where you think, I finished something. You know what? That is an A++ win. It is. It definitely is. That doesn't mean it's good. It might be. I don't know. Just finishing it is good. You might then get to a point in your career where you say, well, I finished it. Great. But now I want to finish it, and I want it to be, I want to be able to show it to people, get feedback, and come away with something that has really been it's been tested. It's quality. And I feel very confident that I've had people give me very legitimate feedback on it, and they really held me accountable. They didn't tell me what I wanted to hear. And my advice is do not surround yourself with yes men. That's a bad path for you. You need someone who can be encouraging, but if you surround yourself with people who tell you what they think you want to hear, you're kind of dooming yourself. You need someone who's going to, let's face it, and I'm going to use some words here. I know some writers who think their shit don't stink. Guess what? It do. And so does yours, and so does mine. And you need people who will tell you that, right? Yeah. Because you want to fix mistakes. Otherwise, it's difficult to get better. Well, anyway, you might think, well, I want it to be good. Then you might think success means getting published. Then you might think success means getting a starred review in Publishers Weekly. Or you might think then success means selling 100 books or 1,000 books or 10,000 books. Or you might think that, success means getting on the New York Times bestseller list or. There's no one answer to how do you define success. My suggestion is take a minute, really be honest with yourself about what you think it means to you, based on where you are in your career. And even if to you it's outlandish, that's okay. Just be honest with yourself about what it means. Because if you're not honest with yourself, it's going to sneak up on you, and in the worst possible moments, and you're going to be gutted when it doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I love that you said that, because one of the things I observed over a couple of years in social media and being part of certain groups was that you would see an author who is getting just like really pushed out there, amazing work, whatever, and then you'd read the book and think, I don't get it. And so what I started to notice was they were surrounding themselves with, like, I call them groupies or bookies, people that would just tell them whatever they wanted to hear. And it stroked their ego and made them feel good, and it sold their book. But those people weren't being legitimate. And eventually it burnt out. It was like a short burn, because eventually those people move on to the next new hot thing, right? So it's really important to be aware that the people that you surround yourself with are willing to absolutely say this is shit, if it is, or, hey, I like this, but I didn't like that. And I think it's so imperative, because there's plenty of people out there that'll stroke your ego. They're not going to make you a better writer.
No, that's a tough one. Yeah, really, really try to have people who are gonna. And I'm not talking about readers who will just say, "Oh, this sucks," or this. Well, I'm talking about people who, and this is a skill, giving helpful critical feedback. It's not that easy, and a lot of people are not good at it. But some people are. Okay, and it doesn't matter if they are published authors or not. Some people are just good at it. Take some time. And you don't need, I know people have like, oh, I've got 50 beta readers. To me, that makes me insane. It's too many voices. I've got 3 people who I trust.
Yes.
And it took me years to find them and to cultivate them, because each person brings something different. One person is just great at structure. Whew, awesome. Another person is great as a brilliant copy editor, catches every grammatical mistake, and he constantly tortures me and makes fun of me for my shitty spelling and wonky grammar. He likes to rub it in.
Yes.
But he's right. And I've got someone else who's very, very good on continuity. Everyone brings something different to the table, and every one of them combined elevates my work to a degree that, very simply, and there's no doubt about it, however good I am, whatever that is, I would not be that good without them. There's no doubt about it. They make me better, and whatever success that I've achieved to this degree, part of that success is theirs. And I tell them that all the time, that my wins are their wins. Oh, by the way, with Trigger Point, we just mentioned, in the end of 2024, in one of the review groups, it won Book of the Year. So
nice.
Yes.
Nice.
So, and I credit it very much to my readers. They pushed me in places that I really needed to go.
Yeah. I love that. And I'm glad that we actually touched on that. And I always try to find like one pivotal kind of moment in these conversations where I feel like we've done something that's really made literature better. When I say literature, I mean, it can be anything, but saying we've said out there, like, this is what it is. And I think with a flooded market, with a saturated market, which we've all seen, I mean, everybody has written a book at this point, or 10. It is really important to figure out a way to set yourself above kind of the existing slush pile, which is now just published books, right? It used to be they never made it to publication. Now they do. So how do we set ourselves above that? And I think that was really
quality of the work. I mean, start there. Gimmicks are great, and sometimes they work. But ultimately, readers either going to connect with what you've written or they're not. And there's no way you're ever going to know in advance. Write the best thing you can, the best thing that you can, in the best way that you know how to do at the time that you do it. Start there. Because if you have quality on the page, you're going to be in a better position than if you don't.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I love that. Truly. Okay. Well, it was really good talking to you, but why don't you go ahead and let everybody know again where they can find you and if you have any other upcoming events.
Sure. So again, Russ Colchamiro, you can see back there. You can find me at my website, which is just russcolchamiro.com. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, on social media, Russ's Rockin' Roller Coaster, which is on YouTube. All the episodes are free. And I'll be on book tour this summer. I'm going to be at StokerCon in Stamford, Connecticut, the weekend of June, I think 13th or 14th, whatever that is. I will be at Shore Leave in Lancaster, Pennsylvania in July. I think it's July, the weekend of July 12th. And I will be at Monster Mania in Oaks, Pennsylvania in November. And I may do one or two others along the way. I'm sort of still trying to figure that out.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah, everybody definitely check out Russ. Check his book set on his website and check out his podcast. I'm actually going to take a look at that because I like watching them as much as I like doing this. Again, we really appreciate you coming on tonight. I thought that was a great conversation. We appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. And again, this will be available to watch after tonight. This is live, but it'll be available on YouTube that you can watch and share. And we just want to remind everybody, it's always time for Go Indie Now. Bye.